Somewhere deep in the heart of America, the fields no longer sing with the joy of harvest. Instead, they smolder in silence, not because of wildfires or the climate, but because the farmers no longer wish to sow. They didn't walk away out of laziness. They're not abandoning the land because it's barren. They're simply choosing between two heartbreaks, harvesting at a loss or letting it all go just to preserve the last shred of their pride. Meanwhile, Canada, a land once dismissed as too cold, too remote, is thriving. It's striking billion-dollar deals to replace American crops on the global market. So what's really happening if American farmers no longer plant? Who will feed this nation? If the land is left to wither, who will preserve the soul of this country? Watch until the end of this video to uncover the 5 US states spiraling into crisis and the real reason why more and more Americans are dreaming of a field in Canada. Number 1. Iowa. If there's one place that has long symbolized the heart of American family farming, it's Iowa. Endless rows of corn stretching to the horizon, silos gleaming beneath the noon sun, afternoons spent with fathers and sons steering tractors, and dinner tables where elders passed down stories of harvests from decades past. Here, farming wasn't just a job, it was a way of life, a badge of identity, a legacy handed down through generations. But in 2025, that very foundation is beginning to crumble, not because someone is trying to destroy it, but because the very people who built it no longer see a reason to hold on. In just the past 18 months, Iowa has lost over 7,800 farms. That's nearly 1/6 of all family-run farms in the United States. And these weren't industrial megafarms operated by machines. These were modest patches of land averaging 30 to 80 acres, where a family of 4 lived, planted fixed equipment, raised cattle, and sent their kids to school on the income from corn and soybeans. When those plots are sold, it's not just acreage that disappears, it's a way of life, a community, a social fabric that collapses along with it. The causes are painfully clear. In the first half of 2025, Iowa saw only 4 to 5 days per month with weather suitable for outdoor farming. Prolonged rain and unusually cold conditions delayed planting schedules, disrupting the entire growing cycle. Simultaneously, tar spot, a destructive fungal disease, spread across 14 major counties. Farmers didn't have enough time to fight it, not enough sun to spray, not enough money to hire experts. And when the harvest fails, the prices don't compensate for the loss. Corn and soybeans were underpriced by giants like ADM and Cargill, while fertilizer, fuel, and equipment costs remain 30% higher than in 2023. Credit loans, which once offered a safety net during rough times, are now harder to access. According to the Minneapolis branch of the Federal Reserve, Iowa is experiencing the highest number of Chapter 12 farm bankruptcies since 2010. But numbers alone can't capture the depth of this crisis, because the real heartbreak doesn't show up on spreadsheets. It's in the silence at dinner when a father can't bring himself to tell his child that next year there might not be any fields left to plant. In Iowa, people once believed that if you worked hard enough, the land would never betray you. But now they must explain to their children, it's not because you're not good enough, it's because this system no longer has a place for you. Just imagine what happens when 85% of a state's farms are family-owned, but those very families are walking away. Who will take their place? Giant agribusiness corporations, foreign investors buying land for profit, fields stripped of names and stories reduced to barcodes and acreage. And this leads to an even more unsettling question. One few dare to ask if Iowa, the most loyal stronghold of traditional agriculture, can no longer sustain its rural communities. What hope is there for the rest of the Midwest Farm Belt? Can you truly say with confidence that 10 years from now, your children will still eat corn and soy grown in America? Or will the day come when we import even the most basic foods from the very nations that once learned agriculture from us? Can you imagine an America, once the world's breadbasket, the nation that helped Europe rise again after World War II, signing deals to import corn from Brazil, soy from Argentina, or grains from Canada? It may sound extreme, but this is no longer fiction. It's happening one step at a time, one field at a time, one farmer at a time. And perhaps the most crushing blow to Iowa isn't the weather. It isn't the prices. It's the sense of abandonment. When you plant seeds in doubt, you hesitate to invest. When you harvest knowing you'll lose money, you lose the will to try again. And when you no longer trust the credit system, market prices, or your local government, even the richest soil turns barren. According to the CDC, Midwest farmers, especially in Iowa, are reporting the highest levels of psychological distress nationwide. Family farm suicides have begun to rise again since the pandemic. But the scariest part isn't the numbers, it's the silence. No one talks about the seasons anymore. The co-op meetings are empty. The weekend farmers markets have lost both sellers and buyers. In Story County, some volunteers have begun offering free mental health counseling to farmers. In the southern parts of the state, a new kind of cooperative is being piloted, families pooling land-sharing equipment, splitting profits, and absorbing risk together. But these efforts are too few and too late to save the thousands of farms already sold or swallowed up by debt. Meanwhile, Canada continues to report strong agricultural exports from provinces like Saskatchewan and Manitoba. In Q2 of 2025 alone, Canadian soybean and corn exports rose by over 34% year over year, exactly the crops Iowa once dominated. And it's no coincidence that Canada's rise coincides with Iowa and Illinois' sharp production decline. But Canada isn't stopping there. It's aggressively expanding its agricultural immigration programs. Not only is it retaining its own talent, it's attracting skilled farmers from abroad, including Americans. Several families from Iowa, once proud corn growers, have sold their land, declared bankruptcy, and are now applying for permanent residency in Canada through regenerative farming programs. A country that once served as the model for others is now watching its own people leave chasing opportunity in a place once dismissed as a frozen frontier. What happened and who allowed it? Which brings us back to the question we should all be asking. If Iowa America's so-called food heartland can no longer survive on agriculture, then who will hold the land if even those born to farm are choosing to walk away? Who then will stay? What's the next worst-case scenario? Perhaps a future where supermarket shelves are full of imports but lack local goods, where food prices shift with foreign diplomacy, where American diets adjust to harvests in Canada, Brazil, or India, where children no longer grow up playing in fields but only read about farming in textbooks. Maybe the real tragedy isn't that Iowa is losing land. It's that we are losing the right to decide where our food comes from, one field at a time, in silence, and with no one held accountable. If history has one warning to give, it is this: no nation remains strong if it cannot feed itself. And if Iowa, our symbol of self-reliance, is collapsing, then maybe America is letting go too. Number 2. Texas. Texas is fast becoming a symbol of an America that's retreating from its very roots. By mid-2025, across the land that was once the heart of the nation's agriculture, hundreds of fields have gone silent. No more hum of harvesters, just the whistle of wind sweeping across barren soil where golden wheat once stood tall. In Amarillo, a major farm owner set fire to his field in the middle of May, not to clear land for the next season, but because no one came to harvest, no buyers showed up, and the longer he kept the crop, the deeper his losses grew. Texas was once considered the unshakable stronghold of American farming. With over 250,000 farms, its agricultural reach stretched from the central prairies to the arid southern plains, providing beef grains, cotton, and vegetables for millions of American households each year. But by mid-year, over 11,000 farms had shut down, been sold, or simply abandoned, and the number continues to rise with no end in sight. There are many causes, but the one choking Texas the fastest and the hardest is the labor crisis. According to the Texas Agriculture Association, roughly 40% of the state's farm labor force consists of immigrants, many of whom are undocumented. They're the ones who pick fruit, harvest grain, milk, cows, clean barns, doing jobs locals either won't do or no longer exist in large enough numbers to do. Since the start of 2025, everything changed dramatically. ICE, the U.S. Immigration Enforcement Agency, intensified surprise inspections across farms, especially in southern Texas. Hundreds of workers vanished overnight. Some farm owners woke up to find no one left to keep operations running right in the middle of the season. And when the workers disappeared, everything else collapsed, with them crops left to unharvested cows, unmilked orders, canceled investments lost entirely. Want to hire legal labor? Be prepared to spend over $20,000 per worker under the H-2A visa program, including wages, insurance, housing, and airfare. For small family farms with just a few dozen acres, that cost is enough to knock them out before they begin. Which leads to a hard question for every American: are we really winning the immigration battle? If it means destroying our own food supply chain, Meanwhile, fertilizer prices have surged over 60% compared to 2 years ago. Fuel costs remain high following domestic production cuts. And even water, a resource Texas was once rich in, is now more precious than gold as water rights battles over the Rio Grande flare up with Mexico. Ironically, Mexico, once heavily dependent on Texas agriculture, has now turned to contracts with Canada. Not everyone sees how big this picture is becoming, but in rural towns it's deeply felt. Supply stores are nearly empty. Gas stations sit quiet. School budgets are slashed. Hospitals can't find enough doctors, and aid programs for the elderly are stalled due to lost agricultural tax revenue. Texas is hurting, but the pain isn't in the soil. It's in the people's fading belief in their homeland. The retreat of Texas farmers isn't just a temporary downturn, it's a warning sign of a larger fracture tearing through the country's core. According to the Texas Farm Bureau, the economic damage to Texas agriculture in the first half of 2025 has exceeded $2.7 billion, primarily due to crop failure, skyrocketing input costs, and canceled export contracts. This is no longer about a bad harvest. It's a deep crack in the foundation of a state once crowned as the leader of American agricultural production. And the impact doesn't end with the farmers. When farms shut down, land taxes drop, leading to cuts in education, healthcare, and community support systems. In several rural counties across northern and central Texas, public schools have reduced teaching hours, postponed infrastructure upgrades, and eliminated extracurricular programs that once gave local kids a sense of pride and belonging. The ripple effects have reached hospitals too. A report from Texas Health and Human Services shows the number of family doctors and nurses serving rural areas has dropped more than 18% compared to last year, mostly due to budget shortfalls. For those living far from cities, especially the elderly, basic healthcare is slipping out of reach. What's even more concerning, the next generation of Texas agriculture is not staying. Recent data shows that the number of Texans under 30 continuing in agriculture has dropped over 23% in the past 5 years. More and more young people are leaving their hometowns, choosing lower paying but steadier work in logistics delivery or maintenance jobs with fewer risks and more certainty. This exodus of successors isn't just a demographic shift, it's a sign that faith in farming is collapsing. And when the traditional way of life no longer offers a way to live, the very values that built rural America begin to unravel. At the same time, Canada continues expanding its agricultural exports into markets that once belonged to the U.S. In Q2 2025 alone, Canada's grain and processed food exports to Mexico, Japan, and Europe rose a combined 18%, much of it from contracts that previously came out of Texas. What's more, many international buyers now prefer Canada's supply, reliable, less volatile, and backed by firm price floors and crop insurance policies. When one side collapses, the other doesn't just watch it rises. And that brings us to the question we can no longer ignore. If even Texas, the largest agricultural state in America, can't hold on to its farmers, then who will feed this country? We might be able to import food, but can America survive if we have to import hope and belief in farming too? Texas isn't just losing land, it's losing the very ability to feed itself. And if this continues, the real question won't be which state falls next. It'll be, will there be any left standing at all? Number 3, Nebraska. Nebraska was once the crown jewel of America's grain belt. From the vast fields of Lincoln to the quiet towns near Scottsbluff, generations of families built their lives around wheat, corn, and soybeans. But by mid-2025, a strange and unsettling silence had descended upon the rural heart of the state. The harvesters have gone quiet. The rumble of grain-loaded trucks heading to the ports is no more. Nebraska, a state that once moved millions of tons of crops to feed the world, is standing still. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, over the past 18 months, more than 7,800 farms in Nebraska have closed, nearly 1/6 of all active farms in the state. In just a single year, Nebraska's grain-producing acreage dropped more than 12%, the steepest decline in 2 decades. But how did one of America's strongest agricultural pillars begin to crumble? At the start of 2025, an event seemingly unrelated to Nebraska's farms set off a devastating domino effect. When the U.S. began pressuring allies to ramp up defense spending, diplomatic tensions spilled over into agricultural trade. Several European partners quietly pulled out of long-standing contracts to import American wheat, shifting their purchases to Canada. No official statements, no press releases. Just a quiet shift in the quarterly trade reports the U.S. was missing. Canada had taken its place. In Q2 2025, Canada exported over 6.6 million tons of grain, up 20% year over year. A significant share of that once belonged to Nebraska farmers. So here's the question. If a single diplomatic meeting can make hundreds of millions of dollars vanish, can farming in America still be considered a stable livelihood? Throughout the spring, wheat prices in Nebraska hovered around $5 per bushel, lower than the cost of production. Grain co-ops refused credit unless farmers had price guarantees or export contracts, something most couldn't provide. Meanwhile, fertilizer, fuel, and pesticides remained expensive, never fully recovering from the post-COVID inflation wave. Many small farms made a painful decision to sit out the season. No planting, no harvesting equipment, no bank loans. They didn't call it quitting, but deep down the faith to continue had quietly slipped away. As Nebraska stood still, Canada accelerated. In Saskatchewan, a province once dismissed as too cold and hostile for agriculture, the federal government invested billions to expand logistics, build grain storage, and upgrade freight rail lines to port. Vancouver's port was expanded for higher shipping capacity. Co-ops received operational subsidies and comprehensive crop insurance. Some farmers were even offered guaranteed minimum prices. If the market dropped, the government paid the difference. This allowed Canada to offer stable prices, on-time deliveries, and a level of predictability that international buyers could trust, something Nebraska no longer could. When the world needs wheat, they call Canada first. When the markets get volatile, buyers prefer countries with clear policies. So here's America's uncomfortable question. How did the nation that once led the world in agriculture lose its position to a competitor so close to the Arctic Circle? In small towns like Kearney and North Platte, the collapse isn't just seen in numbers. It's felt when the mills stop turning, when the tractor supply stores close, when the weekend farmers markets vanish. Local budgets, once sustained by land taxes and farming income, are drying up. Some schools are delaying teacher hires, hospitals are cutting after-hour services, and fire stations have moved to part-time staffing. In one recent fire near Broken Bow, it took nearly 45 minutes for emergency crews to arrive because there simply weren't enough people left on duty. Is this the kind of country we're willing to become? At farmer co-op meetings, no one talks about planting strategies or market projections anymore. Instead, the questions are personal. Should we sell the land? If we keep it, who's going to farm it? If we lose money again next season, how will we feed our kids? Between 2005 and 2015, Nebraska produced nearly 16% of America's grain. By 2025, that number has slipped below 10%, and it's still falling. Meanwhile, Canada has announced plans to expand exports into 5 new markets, including South Korea, Indonesia, and the Middle East. They're not just growing crops. They're replacing America on the world's agricultural map. We, the people of the United States, used to take pride in feeding the world. Now even our own meals depend increasingly on foreign crops. Are you ready for your grandchildren to grow up eating Canadian wheat while the fields in your hometown gather dust? If Nebraska, a state once called the backbone of American agriculture, can't protect its farms, then what state can Nebraska hasn't given up? But it's no longer sure it can keep going. And when a farming state steps back, the loss isn't just in bushels, it's in a future being erased quietly one season at a time. Number 4, Arizona. Once known for its sun-drenched skies, red soil, and reputation for agricultural stability, Arizona is now becoming a retreat zone for those who once called it the Promised Land. But something strange is unfolding in 2025. The migrant labor force is no longer coming to Arizona. They're leaving quietly, decisively in waves. You can see it in the lettuce fields of Yuma, left unharvested mid-season. You can drive past once busy packing warehouses in Pinal County now, with only a few trucks sitting idly outside. This isn't the result of a nationwide economic crisis. It isn't a natural disaster. It's the consequence of policies made right here in America. Since early 2025, ICE has ramped up labor enforcement along the border, especially on vegetable and fruit farms. Major raids were conducted during peak winter harvest, exactly when farms need their largest workforce. The result: workers vanished, orders were canceled, packing lines shut down. And here's the troubling part. It's not just undocumented migrants who are leaving. Even those with legal visas, even Latino American citizens, are withdrawing from Arizona agriculture, fearing the loss of safety and dignity, which raises a sobering question. If even legal workers no longer feel safe, what's left of our essential labor system? When workers leave the crops, don't wait. Hundreds of acres of lettuce, tomatoes, and cucumbers rot under the desert sun. Warehouses are forced to cancel contracts with major supermarkets because they simply can't guarantee timely delivery. At Phoenix's wholesale markets, Arizona's fresh produce shipments have dropped nearly 35% compared to the same time last year, sending prices skyrocketing across western U.S. grocery chains. Have you noticed that vegetables cost more lately? That basic items like cabbage and carrots, once cheap and plentiful, are now premium goods appearing only a few days each week? That's not the market's fault. It's the direct result of having no one to harvest. Let's be honest. If America can build rockets to Mars but can't pick a head of lettuce in Arizona, what exactly is going wrong? If the labor crisis is a direct blow to the gut, the water crisis in Arizona is a slow, silent knife cutting through any chance of agricultural recovery. Since late 2024, counties like Pinal Cochise and Maricopa have faced strict limits on groundwater usage under new Arizona Department of Water Resources regulations. Meanwhile, the Colorado River, Arizona's lifeline, has been further restricted due to prolonged drought and federal disputes among southwestern states. The result, hundreds of farms have been denied permits to dig new wells. The ones remaining are only allowed to irrigate under tight quotas, barely enough to keep crops alive. Why does this matter? Because Arizona supplies nearly 90% of America's winter lettuce. When there's not enough water here, it's not just Arizona that suffers. Millions of meals across the country are affected. But the crisis doesn't stop at the fields. When growers let go, entire communities start to crumble. In Yuma, the state's lettuce capital, dozens of vegetable sorting facilities have reduced their operations by up to 70%, according to the Yuma Agriculture Association. Refrigerated trucks stopped coming. Farming supply stores can't sell seeds or fertilizer. Logistics, packaging, and cold chain transport, every link in the system is being squeezed. And more devastating still is the hidden spiral swallowing the rural poor. When farm jobs vanish, women who once worked part-time in the packing sheds are forced to stay home. With no childcare options, parents can't switch to other industries. A cycle of poverty begins not from laziness, but from the silent unplugging of rural livelihoods. You might think, I live in another state, how does this affect me? But the truth is, the lettuce in your salad, the eggs in your fridge, even the delivery driver at your door, all of them are in some way tied to Arizona. When one farming region collapses, the entire American food system inches closer to imbalance. So while Arizona families are hanging on by a thread, what are they getting from their government? According to the USDA, in early 2025, several key federal aid programs designated for Arizona's farmers were delayed due to budget disputes and political gridlock in Washington. At the same time, a new mandatory avian flu vaccination policy forced one major egg farm in Pinal County to cull over 6 million hens with no accompanying technical or financial support. So farmers ask, if even those who grow our food are left to struggle, who exactly is still standing up for rural America? While Arizona wrestles with costs and instability, Canada is welcoming the very people being pushed out. Through the Agri-Food Pilot Program, Canada is granting permanent residency to workers with experience in vegetable farming, greenhouses, egg, and poultry operations. Provinces like British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan are openly recruiting the very skill sets now going to waste in Arizona. It may sound ironic, but it's true. Americans, once leaders in global food production, are now applying to Canada just to keep farming. A country that used to attract dreams is now the place where dreams are leaving. Still think America is in control. Think again. Because when you lose your labor force, your water access, and your ability to act in time, you've already lost control over your food supply. Arizona is the clearest example of an America slipping from leadership, not because of invasion, but because we've let go of our foundation, our rural communities, and the people who do the hardest work. If even those who came here to work hard can no longer survive, what is there left to hold on to? Arizona is not alone. It's simply the first piece to fall off the once stable map of American agriculture. And if nothing changes, other states will surely follow. Number 5. California. California was once the embodiment of agricultural abundance, the land of endless harvests, misty mornings over grape fields, and golden afternoons among perfect rows of citrus trees. Generations before us shaped the Central Valley into a living legacy, a place where the soil bore fruit and where every peach was packed not just as produce, but as a promise that America could feed itself with its own hands. But in 2025, that pride has begun to unravel into quiet embarrassment. A silent, aching question now lingers in the minds of millions of Americans. Have we lost control of the very thing that once made us strong? In the Central Valley, once responsible for nearly a quarter of all fresh fruit grown in the United States, the numbers are now paralyzed. Electricity costs to run irrigation systems have skyrocketed by over 150% in just 2 years. Hundreds of farms have been forced to shut off the water mid-season, effectively choosing to let the trees die. The blossoms fall, the fruit wither, and the harvest vanish. Farmers who once endured crises with resilience are now facing a stark new reality. Electricity bills alone are enough to wipe out any profit, and that's not even counting the tightening restrictions on groundwater access. Many areas are now forbidden from digging new wells even when their current ones run dry. Growers have lost control over the most basic necessity for farming water. The seasons still come, the trees still bloom, but the people they're letting go. Can you imagine the helplessness of a citrus farmer standing in his grove watching rows of trees wilt from thirst, only to be told he can't drill a well, not because of a lack of technology or effort, but because environmental regulations won't allow it? So we must ask, if the farmer can't even decide how to water his own land, whose agriculture is this really? And while these growers are being strangled by rising costs, they're also being undercut by waves of cheaper imported fruit. In Los Angeles, supermarkets, avocados from Mexico, apples from New Zealand, and kiwis from Chile are now sold at prices lower than the cost of growing them in California. The bitter truth, Californians themselves walk into stores, see the cheaper option, and buy it. Not because they hate local produce, but because they simply can't afford otherwise. And just like that, bit by bit, Central Valley produce is being pushed off American dinner tables on American soil. So here's the real question. If Americans no longer eat American fruit, who are we feeding? It doesn't stop there. Over the past 18 months, a wave of new environmental policies has left fruit farmers feeling like they're not just producing, but defending themselves. From methane emission controls on farms to dust limits from field equipment to even noise report requirements, any one of these can lead to fines or lawsuits. And ironically, many of these complaints come from new suburban homeowners who moved near the farms. People who left the city seeking peace and quiet, only to later complain about the hum of harvesters at dawn or the smell of manure when the wind shifts. And so after years of faithfully working the land and following every regulation, California farmers suddenly find themselves cast as nuisances in the very places they were born and raised. That feeling of being pushed out of your own homeland, not because you failed in the market, but because you were suffocated by the expectations of those who never understood agriculture. That's a wound you'll never see in any government report. 50,000 American farms have shut down in less than 2 years. These are no longer just numbers. These are families losing their land towns, losing their schools, and a nation quietly losing control over its own dinner table. When Texas burns its fields, when Nebraska stops planting, when Arizona runs out of water, when California loses on its own turf, and when Iowa retreats in silence, who will be left to hold the land that once fed us all? You might think this only happens in faraway rural towns, but haven't you already seen it creeping into your grocery bill, the empty shelves at your local store, and the choices missing from your family's dinner plate? Tell us in the comments. How long do you think America can still hold the title of agricultural superpower? This video does not promote division or support secession. All content is presented for the purpose of analysis, reflection, and to spark honest debate based on facts, emotions, and the real trends shaping our society. We respect the Constitution of the United States and all federal laws. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next episode, where we uncover the stories mainstream media often leave untold.